Hey there everyone, Ian here, and welcome back to the channel. So this week we're going to be talking about making interesting and complex characters for your stories. Creating the characters of your story is one of the three building blocks of creative writing, which makes it one of the most important aspects in what you write. However, creating good characters is another matter. If you don't have good, well-rounded, interesting characters, your characters will seem flat and boring and can ruin the story all on their own. I will be giving you some ways you can make your character interesting and well-rounded and using that to level up your story. With that being said, let's get into it. Before we can get into the tips I have, it's good to know the difference between what a flat and well-rounded character are. A flat character is one-dimensional and is not complex at all, while a rounded character is three-dimensional, interesting, and complex. It is also just as important to not confuse these two terms with static and dynamic characters. The difference for these two is that one is for complexity, which is the rounded and flat. Then you have the static and dynamic characters, which are for the changes the characters make in the story. A static character does not undergo major internal changes throughout the story, and that is the opposite for dynamic, who do change immensely throughout the plot of the story. Going a little deeper with these, you have static and flat characters. Flat characters are always static, but static characters are not always flat. And the same can be said with dynamic and rounded. All rounded characters are dynamic, but not all dynamic characters are rounded. The tips I'm going to share with you are not specifically tailored towards static or dynamic characters, but more towards flat or rounded characters. But I will be doing a video on static and dynamic characters in the future. Sometimes it's okay to have flat characters in your story, but there aren't many different times where it would be necessary or needed. There are two different points where I think that flat characters are okay, and that is when you're writing a children's book, or if it's just a background character which you only see once or twice throughout your story. The one caveat to this is that you don't want your main character to be flat. The main character is supposed to change through the story. That's what the story is about, how they change. So if they don't change, there's no story to be had with them. Sometimes, on very rare occasions, it's also okay to have your supporting cast that show up more often throughout the book than background characters to be flat. But that's really only when we're talking about static and dynamic instead of flat and rounded. But it really just depends on what you need that character for. Now we're reaching the meat and potatoes of the video, where I'm going to be telling you how to make your characters rounded and interesting. This is all about putting together the psychology of your character. Every one of these things is important to creating a character and making their psychology complex and interesting. So the first step you're going to have is to create a backstory. And the backstory is what happened in the character's past. It's what shapes them to be who they are today. The backstory also forms the character's worldview, which is what makes them think the way they think and believe what they believe. The backstory is the first step to this, and if you don't make a backstory for the character, it'll be more difficult to create that well-rounded character that you're wanting to create. Next are the looks, and you may be thinking that that doesn't really matter. It's only there to make my characters look nice and stuff. Well, I have news for you. No matter how much I want to believe that it's there to make my characters look nice and awesome, they're not. Their looks actually tell a lot about them and their personality, and some more about them. For example, how they dress or how they look could tell you where they're from, or what standing they're in. Like if someone were to wear a really nice dress and keep their hair all decorated and this, you might infer that they may be upper class, royalty, nobility, people that have more money than others around them. It can also tell you about their personality, and that's more down to personal preference of them. Like if their hair is let down, choppy, if it's well kept. All these different things can tell people more about what these characters do and where their origins lie. Morals come next. Every character has morals, as does everyone in real life, so your character should have morals too. Are they the good guys? Are they the bad guys? Are they morally gray between those two? Will they easily kill someone, or is that something they don't ever want to be able to do to someone? I like to write my characters across the spectrum of good, bad, and morally gray. Another thing you have to think of when you're thinking about their morals is, what are their values? What do they value in another person? Do they value the ability to kill people? Do they value the ability to be kind or generous to someone? The values someone has ties directly into their morals. After morals comes the voice of the character. By this I mean how they speak, how they move, how they react to things, how they act around other people or on their own. An example of this would be being proper and regal, soft-spoken, easily scared by other people or things, and constantly second-guessing themselves. The voice of the character is something important you have to think about when writing them, so they seem different from everyone else. If everyone else in your story has the same voice, they're all going to seem the same, and you're not going to want to read the same characters over and over and over again. The next step is quirks and mannerisms. It's fun and more interesting to have the characters you make have interesting quirks or mannerisms that separate them from the rest. So this builds on the voice, but this is more how they act or how their mannerisms go or how they tick. Quirks are small features of a character that makes them unique to others. This includes things such as eye color or freckles. Maybe they always wear flashing clothes or are a perfectionist. These different things are quirks to a character, and there are an infinite amount more of them that you can find lists for online that will help you write these more and more. Mannerisms, on the other hand, while similar, are not quite the same. Mannerisms are gestures, speech patterns, or ways they act that is characteristic of that one individual. Usually it's done out of habit, and usually the people don't realize they're doing it unless someone points it out to them. Someone who is confident would probably retain eye contact or talk with confidence in their voice. Someone who is angry may clench their fists, or perhaps they hug their knees to their chest when they're scared. These different mannerisms make a character unique, just like everything else in this list. I think it's important to have at least one quirk and some mannerisms for each character that you make that are not background characters. You don't need to be fleshing this stuff out for your background characters or anything. I think it's important for these next few things to happen, and I think it's some of the most important parts of it. We're going to bring up goals and motivations first. Your characters should have goals and motivations, as this is an integral part of the story itself and the characters. Goals and motivations should, when possible, be attached to the story they are being a part of. Now, these three coming sections are very similar, but they're all still just as important to making your character interesting. These three are likes and dislikes, strengths and weaknesses, skills and interests. These 6 terms are in sets of 2 in order from how I read them. So your likes and dislikes. Everyone has something they like or something they dislike. No matter how edgy you are, you're going to like something. No matter how gold-hearted you may be, you are going to dislike something. That is just part of being human. Even if they're an orc or an elf or some other spacefaring race, you will like or dislike something. So it is important to have that in there. Your dislikes could also extend to the fears that a character has. For example, I dislike and I fear spiders. Someone may dislike something but not fear it. And it's important to distinguish what someone's afraid of and what someone dislikes, because while being similar, they are not the same thing. Strengths and weaknesses are simple and straightforward. Strengths are things that you excel at, while weaknesses are the inverse, which are things you are not nearly as good at. Your strength could also be your weakness. For example, in Avatar: The Last Airbender, at the final battle, Aang doesn't want to kill Ozai because he's compassionate, which is a strength. But where it comes to a weakness is that if he doesn't do something about him, then the world will be in a lot more danger than if he doesn't. And luckily he finds a way to not have to kill him, but that is an example of a strength becoming a weakness. It wasn't that much of a weakness in the end, since he found a way out of it, but it can still be considered a weakness. Finally, we have skills and interests. Just like the other two, they're very similar, but they're slightly different to each other. Skills are things you work at and get better at as time goes on, such as if you practice fencing for a long time, you'll get skillful at fencing and be able to win more. Same as if you're writing or doing art, the more you do with it, the better the skill is going to become. On the other hand, interests are things that, well, they interest you. Skills and strengths are probably the closest in this list, but they are just different enough I think they deserve to be separate. Every person in this world or fictional world is interested in something, or they're skillful at something else, or they're interested and skilled in said thing. If you don't have these, then a spark may seem like it's missing in the character you're writing, and it can be seen by the readers, and this may make them seem more flat than they would otherwise be, even with everything else on this list being out. These are at the bottom, but they're not least important. Anything on this list is up to your discretion. None of this is in order of what it should be done when creating a character. Everyone creates a character in their own way. These are just the things I take into account when writing up different characters. And that's it. Those are some ways to help you get better at creating interesting and rounded characters. Comment below your process of making your characters. Do you take these things that I put into my list into account, or do you add some or take some off this list? Also, tell me what I could do to improve the quality of my videos in the future. I hope this helped, and if it did, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already, because I will be posting videos like this every Sunday. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all next week. Bye!